Pastor Phil, the Kingdom Priest, and today we're going to review a sermon by Bertrand Compray, the good pastor, entitled Man and Beast. In these studies, it has been our custom to frequently review current events in detail because these show the fulfillment of Bible prophecies in our day. However, in covering this subject, I now want to discuss. I shall not have much occasion to list these events in detail, and this is for a definite reason. There are times when it is not so important to count every bead on the string as it is to see whether they are all strung on the same string. When you learn this, you will know where to look for the next bead. My purpose is to show the existence of definite principles which govern the events which we see happening, as these principles have governed them for thousands of years. For ages, it was well understood by everyone that various nations and races had certain characteristics, which usually would be demonstrated in the actions of these people. National and racial policies and conduct developed out of a national and racial character. There were the rare exceptions, and these a type of mind seizes upon as proof there was no general rule. The exception merely proves the rule. Similarly, we can note that among crows, one bird in every 38 million is white, an albino. But this only emphasized the rule that all the other 38 million crows are black. Therefore, reasonably consistent conduct can be identified as the rule, notwithstanding an occasional exception which might surprise us all when we find it. Among the ancients, nobody pretended to be ignorant of the characteristics of the Babylonians, Egyptians, Assyrians, or the Romans, or that they were likely to do in order to execute their purpose. Roman military ability in war and harshness in rule over conquered people were well understood, and nobody was surprised to meet them. We all knew the extreme ferocity and cruelty of the Assyrians. Centuries of history demonstrated a consistency in these characteristics, which only a fool could ignore. In our times, everyone understood that the Japanese were a warlike people and had been for 2,000 years. Therefore, only the ignorant or the stupid were surprised to learn Japan wanted to conquer many other nations. Therefore, we had to learn by terrible first-hand experience that the Japanese had the Asiatic characteristic of treachery and seamless cruelty for its own sake. This cruelty was not typically Japanese, it was typically Asiatic. We see the same traits displayed by the Red Chinese in the treatment of the people of Tibet, as well as their cruelty to our soldiers when they were captured. During both the First and Second World Wars, those strange aliens called Jews, who are also busily brainwashing us today to suit their own purpose, then propagandized us into believing many hideous lies about the Germans. From these lies, we were expected to believe that the Germans were so inherently wicked that they were about to invade Beverly Hills or Las Vegas. Then they taught us that inborn racial characteristics would be manifested in conduct whenever the situation called for it. But now this alien minority group of Jews teaches us, by corrupting most of our schools, newspapers, news commentators, even many of our churches, that they are no longer any racial characteristics or tendencies, no fixed long-line national purpose. These Jews now want us to believe all people in the world, black, white, yellow, or brown, civilized or savage, are exactly alike, as interchangeable as Ford parts. They have spent millions of dollars on a high-pressure propaganda campaign designed to blind us to the racial and national characteristics and purpose which are molding the course of history today, as they would have molded history throughout all time. It might be well to ask, what makes this worth so much money to them? Just how are they planning to get back this enormous investment? We can get a better perspective on present day affairs if we view them as continuation of thousands of years of uninterrupted history. If we look not only for what happened, but also why it happened, nothing important is a true accident. For every occurrence, there is a cause. History is usually written as merely a list of effects. That is why we learn so few lessons from it. We will never really understand history until we list the causes also. Past history, current events, and the coming events of the future all consist of the actions of people, whether their actions are good or bad. People do what they do because they are what they are, the kind of people who do good or bad things. Conduct is the product of character. The man who is kind and trustworthy by nature doesn't become a Jack the Ripper or a kidnapper of children. His own nature will prevent it. The man who is by nature cruel or dishonest will sooner or later act like what he is. The dull do not become brilliant merely because they receive legal permission to do so. Since nations and races are just numbers of individual people, they will display those traits, which are characteristic of most of their people. Therefore, if we can learn something about what kinds of people there are, this may help us to understand their actions, even to learn what to expect from them in the future. From their own purposes, men make various classifications of things and people, but usually the conclusion they wish to reach dictate the classification which will best support wishful thinking, vitiates the result. On the other hand, Yahweh, who views all eternity with a single glance, has his other truths revealed to man. So we must look to the Bible. There we will find that Yahweh has classified several different kinds of beings, all of whom we look linked together indiscriminately under one term, man. Yahweh distinguishes between them and by using distinctive names for the different kinds of beings. Let's examine them and see if the different words used have any significance as to the kinds of people they denote, the level of character and spiritual understanding to be found, and different kinds of people identified by their different names. Several different Hebrew words have all been indiscriminately translated man or men in the first King James Bible, although some are very important differences of meaning so early on the face of these words. First, let us consider the word which denotes the white race, the Hebrew word Adam, called Adam in your Bible, is from the root word meaning to be of a ruddy complexion, to show blood in the face. something obviously not applicable to Negroes or Mongoloids, but only to the white race. When used to denote the first white man, Adam, the Hebrew always translates the Adam. When used of his descendants, the Hebrew just says Adam. The King James Bible translated man. Another word in contrast to Adam is Enosh, which is always used in a derogatory sense. Its root meaning is moral and implies weakness, physically or morally, wretchedness. It is applied to non-Adamic races, which we are, of course, all pre-Adamic. It should be noted that the pre-Adamic races are not limited geographically to just certain parts of the earth, but some of them are found mingled among the Adamites. A third word translated man is Ish. Literally, it means a male person or a husband. It is used for mankind in general and can be applied to either Adamic or pre-Adamite. The feminine form is Isha, the plural of which is Nashim. This is so similar to the plural of Enosh and Ashim, they have been confused, leading to many mistakes in the translations. There are three other closely related words, Gerber, Gebar, and Gibar, which are all derived from a root meaning to be strong. They are usually translated mighty man or warrior. These last three can cause no confusion, so they need not concern us further. Now let us note a few examples of the use of these words in the Bible. In place of the English word man, I will use the Hebrew word used in Ezekiel 34:1 records, and ye, my flock, the flock of my pasture, are Adam, and I am your God, saith Yahweh. Psalms 115:116 states, even the heavens are Yahweh's, but the earth he hath given to the children of Adam. Note how Yahweh usually uses Adam and Enosh in contrast. Take Psalms 90:93. For example, thou turnest Enosh to destruction, and sayest, return ye children of Adam, while destruction is visited upon the pre-Adamite Enosh for their persistent wickedness. Yahweh leads the children of Adam back to himself in repentance. Yahweh distinguishes between Adam and Enosh in many places. For example, Psalm 8:4. What is Enosh, that thou art mindful of him, and son of Adam, that thou hast visited him? Note that while Yahweh is mindful of what the Enosh do, it was the sons of Adam Yeshua visited when Yeshua came to the earth. Both racial groups must be disciplined, but the distinction is kept clear even there. Isaiah 2:11 records, the lofty books of Adam shall be humbled, and the haughtiness of Enosh shall be bowed down, and Yahweh alone shall be exalted in that day. In 2 Samuel 7:14, we read, I will be his father, and he shall be my son. If he commits iniquity, I will chasten him with the rod of Enosh, and with the stripes of the children of Edom. If these are not distinctly different races, there should be no point using different words. The Enosh were wicked, and so spoken of in Deuteronomy 13:13. Certain Enosh, the children of Belial, are gone out from among you, and have withdrawn the inhabitants of their city, saying, Let us go and worship other gods, which ye have not known. When they gain power, they are brutal oppressors. Psalms 10:17 through 18 tells us, Yahweh, thou hast heard the desire of the humble. Thou wouldst prepare their hearts. Thou wilt cause thine ears to hear, to judge the fatherless and the oppressed, that the Enosh of the earth may no more oppress. The Enosh have no spiritual understanding. That is the reason for their continual wickedness. From Proverbs 28:5, Evil Enosh understand not judgment, but they that seek Yahweh understand all things. This distinction is still in effect today. Daniel 12:10. Speaking of the time at the end, which is our own time, states, None of the wicked shall be understand, but the wise shall understand. That is not all. Some races Yahweh classifies as animals, and their nations are symbolized as beasts in numerous prophecies. Do you say that this isn't just what you have been taught to believe? Then let's look into this a bit and learn what the Bible says about it. When Jonah finally went to Nineveh with this prophecy that Yahweh intended to destroy the city for its people's wickedness, they believed him. This is not as surprising as it may seem, for the people of Nineveh worshipped Dagon, the fish god, the symbol of William Finck's Christogenea, I might add. Since they had heard a great fish and delivered Jonah to the sea, they thought he must be a prophet, and sent from Dagon, and they were ready to believe him. Jonah chapter 3 says that the king was worried, and he caused it to be proclaimed and published throughout Nineveh by decree of the king and his nobles, saying, Let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock taste anything. Let them not feed nor drink water. But let man and beast be covered with sackcloth, and cry mightily unto Yahweh. Yea, let them turn every one from his evil ways, and from the violence that is in their hands. And Yahweh said of their works, that they turned from their evil ways, and Yahweh repented of the calamity that he said that he would do to them, and he did it not. Now what kind of beasts were those who put on sackcloth and cried to Yahweh and turned from their evil ways? It says this was the command for man and beast, and that they did it. So is your dog well trained? Then who was it the Bible calling beasts? Let's look into this a bit further. In Genesis chapter 9, Yahweh promises Noah and his family protection. In the 5th verse, Yahweh says, And surely your blood of yours lives well. I require it. At the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of them. These beasts have hands like a man, but there were no monkeys in that region, so these beasts with hands must have been men. Exodus 19:12 through 13. When the people of Israel were gathered at the foot of Mount Sinai, while Moses climbed the mountain to receive the Ten Commandments from Yahweh, Yahweh warned him, "And thou shalt set bounds unto the people round about, saying, Take heed to yourself, that you go not up to the mount, nor touch the borders of it. Whosoever toucheth the mount shall surely be put to death. There shall not be a hand touch it, but he shall surely be stoned or shot through. Whether it be beast or man, it shall not live." We find whether it was beast or man, it must not touch the mountain with a hand. Now, let us continue. The second chapter of Genesis tells us Yahweh is looking for a suitable wife for Adam and brings in review from him what the King James Bible calls every beast of the field, to see if a good wife for Adam could be found among them. Do you really think it was all wise Yahweh had to carefully look over a female scorpion, female toad, female giraffe, or female elephant to decide whether one of these would be a suitable wife for Adam? Of course not. Moses didn't write any such foolishness. When he wrote the book of Genesis, this is purely the work of translators. In the original Hebrew, the account makes good sense and tells us much about the other races. There are two closely related Hebrew words used here, kai and kayal, each of which means a living creature. The meaning is far too broad to be translated merely beast or animal, for it includes all living things, from microbes to men. Where the King James Bible says of the beast of the field, the word is always either kai or koyah. So a correct translation would be the living beings in the country. That these living beings include men is clear from the same word being applied to Adam. Read Genesis 2:7. And Yahweh formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. In the Hebrew it reads, Then Yahweh God formed the Adam out of dust and from the ground, and breathed in his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. In Hebrew it reads, Then Yahweh God formed the Adam out of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils breath of life, and the Adam became Nephish Kayah, a breathing, living creature having life. So the beasts of the field, the Kakayah of the field, or more correctly, the living beings in the countryside, actually include the pre-Adamic races. Now, Genesis 2:18 through 20 makes sense. Yahweh saw that Adam needed a wife, and, not condemning anybody without a fair chance to make good, Yahweh carefully looked over the pre-Adamic races, Africans and Asiatic, to see if one of them could be found who was suitable to be Adam's wife and the mother of the new race. But he couldn't find one. In the Hebrew it reads, and Yahweh said, Not good for the Adam to be alone. I shall make him a helper as his counterpart. And Yahweh formed from the ground every living creature, every living being of the fields, and every fowl of the heavens. and bringeth in unto the Adam to see what he doth call it, and whether the Adam calleth a nephesh kaya, a breathing creature having life, that is its name. And the Adam called names to all the cattle, and to the fowl of the heavens, and to every living being of the fields. And to him hath not been found a helper as his counterpart. Yahweh recognized Adam's wife must be his counterpart, having the same qualities of a spiritual understanding, to be able to transmit to her descendants the same qualities for which Yahweh specially placed upon Adam in the world. But Yahweh could not find even one out of these pre-Adamic people who was Adam's counterpart, having these necessary qualities. Now, before somebody gets the idea that I hate other races, let's look at this thing a little closer. The black race has been on Earth at least 40,000 years, for identifiable Negroid skeletons have been discovered which can be scientifically dated as that old. Yet in all these 40,000 years, there has never been a Negro civilization. Yes, I know that a few Negro tribal chiefs have conquered other tribes and built up a larger kingdom, but it takes more than the brutal tyranny of a successful war chief to make a civilization, and that was all they had. Don't speak of Egypt. Egypt was in Africa, but never a Negroid. The beautiful portrait sculptures left by the ancient Egyptians show them to have been clearly a pure white people. In the days of Egypt's greatness, any Negro found north of the first cataract of the Nile River was summarily killed on sight to protect the racial purity of the Egyptians. We don't hate Negroes. We want them to be well fed, well clothed, comfortably housed, and in no danger of being eaten by other Negroes, something they have never had except in civilization, created and maintained by white men. Despite all the propaganda, every Negro in the United States is far better off than those in Africa. Just try to find any who wants to go back to any black nation in Africa. But neither Negroes nor whites will have the blessings of civilization in a nation reduced to black standards of thinking. If the Negroes were capable of producing a civilization at all, 40,000 years is long enough to do it. Yes, I know in Asia, 2,300 years ago, Confucius taught some high ethical principles, but without a word of religion in them. I know the Ming Dynasty saw the production of some nice pieces of porcelain, but what did either of these do for the Asiatic people? Did it ever teach them how to produce enough food to fill those fine porcelain bowls? Shouldn't 2,300 years of Confucian philosophy be enough to develop something more than pottery, disease, and misery? Again, the Asiatic mind lacks the true spiritual understanding which I always saw was needed. Aren't the Asiatics who live in the United States better off than those who live in Red China, Korea, or Southeast Asia? We don't hate them, but we don't want them to reduce us to their level. This is what Yahweh was talking about in Genesis chapter 2 when he said that the other beings living in the field round about could not produce a suitable wife for Adam as his counterpart. Because of the spiritual understanding which Yahweh put in Adam, today the white race has the highest civilization, greatest freedom, and the highest standard of living in the world. They are the so-called have nations. We have not hated the other race. We have tried to help them, to show them our ways. In spite of all this, and all of them have hated us. In the centuries when we were very few against their many, they repeatedly tried to conquer and destroy us. Yahweh's watchful care over his people didn't allow this to happen, although several times they came dangerously close to success. In lands with minerals, they sit in wretchedness and poverty, too lacking in enterprise to mine the enormous wealth beneath their feet. In lands where the fertile soil and ample rainfall cover the lands with lush growth, they live in perpetual hunger because they are too dull to clear the land and to plant to it food crops. If we provide the capital to pay them for clearing their land and for planting and harvesting useful crops, or for digging and refining the minerals in their soil, they curse us. They say we're exploiting them. But if we don't, they curse us for being indifferent to their misery. Now, through the United Nations, where they outnumber us and outvote us, they plan to rule, plunder, enslave, and reduce us to their level. Well did Yahweh classify them as Enosh, lacking utterly in spiritual understanding necessary to follow Yahweh's ways. Perhaps you may say, all these were quoted from the Old Testament, but in the New Testament, Yahweh changed his mind and changed all this. Let's see what the New Testament says about them. In the epistle to Titus, recorded in Titus 1:12, Paul says, one of themselves, even a prophet of their own, said, the Cretans are always liars, evil beasts. The word beast here is the Greek word therion, meaning a dangerous animal. Jude chapter 10 states, but these speak evil of those things they know not, but what they know naturally as brute beasts, in those things they corrupt themselves. Now from Peter 2:12, it continues, but these, as natural brute beasts, made to be destroyed, speak evil of the things they understand not, and shall utterly perish in their own corruption. The Enosh were commonly called dogs, both in the Old Testament and New Testament. For example, all Bible scholars, as prophetic of Yeshua's first coming and crucifixion, recognize Psalm chapter 22. In the 16th verse, it states, for dogs have compassed me, the assembly of the wicked have enclosed me. They have pierced my hands and my feet. Yahweh is certainly not complaining that some four-footed dogs barked at him. There is no record that any ever did. He is speaking of those who delivered him up to be crucified. The use of this word is common in the New Testament. In Philippians 3:2, Paul says, beware of dogs, beware of evil workers. The four-footed dogs are no more evil workers than cats and cows. Paul and those to whom he wrote knew these dogs were the two-footed kind. If you say this is a discrimination between the races, you're exactly right. Has someone told you that monstrous falsehood that it isn't Christian to discriminate between races? Well, let's see what Yahweh did in Mark 7:25 through 29. For a certain woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard of him and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syro-Phoenician by nation, and she besought him that he would cast forth the devil out of her daughter. But Yahshua said unto her, Let the children first be filled, for it is not right to take the children's bread and to cast it unto the dogs. And she answered and said unto him, Yea, master, yet the dogs under the table eat of the children's crumbs. And he said unto her, For this saying, Go thy way, the devil is gone out of thy daughter. Yeshua certainly didn't discriminate, not until the woman recognized the righteousness of the discrimination did he help her. She at first has asked help of him on the same basis as the Israelites, true Adam. In that basis, she was entitled to it. Yeshua told her, Let the filled children first be filled with the bread of life. Then they established the kingdom of Yahweh on earth, and from this Yahweh's blessings shall be extended to such others as can understand and receive them in the proper spirit. Meanwhile, Yeshua did not hesitate to openly call the Enosh dogs. When the woman indicated that she understood the blessings would come to others out of the abundance which Yahweh gave to his own children, and then he told her, for this saying, he had healed her daughter. Yeshua carefully warned his disciples never to make the mistake of failing to discriminate, never to try to bring the Enosh who lack understanding into the kingdom of Yahweh on the same terms as the Adam. In Matthew 7:6, he warned them, Give not that which is holy unto the dogs, neither cast your pearls before swine, lest they trample them under their feet and turn again and rend you. Strong words, yes, but a direct command of Yahshua. We have disobeyed him, so now we are facing the tragic penalty. We've tried to treat the other races as equals. We expected them to learn the same lessons from our religion that we do. We have expected them to behave with some self-restraint when they find power in their hands. But this is exactly what Yahshua warned us not to do, lest they trample our pearls under their feet and turn again and rend us. Of our advanced technology, they want only to learn how to make weapons to use against us. In fact, they are even using the very food we send them as weapons against us. For the surplus food will allow them to take more men off the farms, put them in the armies and weapon factories, to thus strengthen our enemies, is a fool's method of suicide. To his disciples, Joshua said in John 14:16 and 17, And I will pray the Father, and he shall give you another comforter, that he may abide with you forever, even the Spirit of truth, whom the world cannot receive, because it seeth him not, neither knoweth him, but ye know him, for he dwelleth with you, and shall be in you. Therefore it was logical to speak of those minds lack the spiritual understanding as beasts, because of their nature. In the book of Dan, the prophet traces the rise and fall of four great world empires ruled by these people. First, he interprets Nebuchadnezzar's dream of the great image, whose head was of gold, his breast and arms of silver, his belly and thighs of brass, his legs of iron, as prophesying the successive dominance of four great empires. Nebuchadnezzar's Babylon was the first of these, the golden head, and the others being Medo-Persian, Alexander's, and Rome. In Daniel chapter 7, Daniel has a vision of four remarkable beasts rising one after the other out of the sea. We know that in prophecy, the sea is symbolic of mankind in general, and perhaps politics. The first lion symbolized Babylon, like the golden head of the image, and the second, a bear, symbolized the great empires of Media and Persia. The third, a leopard, for the swift striking empire of Alexander the Great. And the fourth is a very, very terrible beast with iron teeth, 10 horns, and great strength, symbolizing Rome. This was exactly the same series in the same order as the image of Nebuchadnezzar's dreams. Its repetition was to confirm the first as true prophecy. As further confirmation in the book of Revelations, we again find a beast representing those world empires riding out of the sea. Revelations chapter 13, we are told this strange beast had the mouth of a lion, feet of a bear, yet otherwise was like a leopard, but it had 10 horns, like the fourth beast and Daniel saw. The fact that the qualities of all four are now combined in one beast is to show that the four great world empires were of all one origin, all manifestations of satanic power, all arising out of the sea of non-Adamic races. They came to power in succession. Each gained enormous power over the people who lived in great areas. The rule of each was harsh, tyrannical, and brutal, each one more so than those before it. Man's planning, man's skill in putting his plans into effect, man's ability to judge what was needed in ruling an empire, these they had. But the spiritual understanding, the capacity to receive the thoughts of Yahweh, the capacity to organize and rule a nation under Yahweh's laws, these they lack. Revelation 13 shows this composite beast gains its power from the dragon, Satan. Surely these empires demonstrate their satanic character. Finally, to make sure that the symbolism of the vision would not be misunderstood, Revelation 13:18 concludes, "Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man." The fall of the Roman Empire, only the vast extent of power in the hands of those who serve Satan. It has not ended their desire to regain that power, nor their struggle for it. So the book of Revelation shows a continuation of the struggle for power, carried on by a new beast, right down to the time of the second coming of Yahshua. The beast makes war against him, but is conquered by Yeshua. When we see this struggle going on for power in the world today, the non-Adamic people, now organized into many nations, so as to multiply their voting power in the United Nations, were just the cannibal tribes of Africa alone, and now are recognized as about 30 nations, having 30 votes to our one. There is not one of them that can stand reliably on our side. Once in a while, they find it to their advantage to seek something which we also want to accomplish, and on that one issue, they vote with us. But the next day, they either proclaim their neutrality in our struggle for the survival of the free world, with which they have no sympathy, or they actively support Russia against us. It is inevitable that those who are of the same race, the same origin, having the same qualities, the same ambitions and ideals, could align themselves together, working for their own common purpose. In the great world empires of the past, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Alexander's short-lived empire, and finally Rome, they had what they wanted: a system which expressed their own true character. They want to restore this system, and the United Nations is made to order for their purpose, as Yahweh prophesied in Revelations 13:14. We are told that the new beast deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by means of the miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth that they should make an image of the beast, which has the wound by the sword and did live. They seek to make the United Nations a worldwide empire, like that of Babylon and Rome, only greater, an empire which crushes and dominates all nations, enforcing its will by bestiality, brutal force, as we have seen in the Congo, an empire which repudiates the one true God, where the name of Yahshua cannot be mentioned, because it offends those who hate him, and where the only reference to any divinity is to the statue of the pagan god Zeus in the lobby. An empire ruled by those whom the Bible calls beasts, for they now outnumber the whole white race by 8-1 in voting strength. Though we have 1/6 of the world's population, by juggling of voting power, we are reduced to 1/9 of its voting strength. When we see their plans for world rule developing, we can begin to understand the dreadful prophecy, the coming day where no man might buy nor sell, save he have the mark or the name of the beast. Nevertheless, the return of Yahshua shall overthrow their plans. Their power shall be destroyed, and they will be put in their proper place. This place emphatically does not include rule over the nation that has brought too many thousands of years of misery and sorrow. In the final end, when Yahweh's new Jerusalem is set upon the earth, we are told in Revelations 22:14 and 15, "Blessed are they that do his commandments, that they may have the right to the tree of life, and may enter through the gates into the city, for without are dogs." This doesn't mean you can have your pussycat, canary, and goldfish, but faithful Fido is excluded. And these dogs, Yahshua's names, are humans. Discrimination, do you say? Yes, indeed. But from the start to the finish, from Genesis to Revelations, Yahweh has commanded discrimination. I would not oppose it if I could. Thank you. This has been Pastor Phil, the Kingdom Priest. Goodbye.